past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time, shipping vessels of history, ancient history, destroying the fabric, the godlike claw of destiny, of a people, with a gun, a knife, a cannon, building the hideous wall of blood.
Greetings and welcome back. Israeli double tap strike on Gaza's Nasser hospital kills journalists and rescue workers. How do Netanyahu and Steve Witkoff and Trump talk about negotiations and negotiating while they're blowing up hospitals and starving people to death? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. Let's quickly get to a couple of today's headlines. 2 children dead, 17 injured in shooting during a mass at Minneapolis Catholic school. 2 children were killed and more than a dozen were injured in a shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis this morning around 8:30 at the Annunciation Church on the city's southwest side. The gunman also died after turning a weapon on himself. DHS moves to bar aid groups from serving undocumented immigrants. Disaster aid groups said the new contracts would make it harder for nonprofits to help the most vulnerable Americans in the aftermath of a disaster. You know, there's a poem entitled The New Colossus. It's by Emma Lazarus, and it's an inscription that you find on a plaque inside the Statue of Liberty's pedestal. And the poem reads as follows: "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Why is Donald Trump closing and locking that golden door? DC judges and grand jurors push back on Trump policing surge. A federal grand jury refused to indict a man who threw a sandwich at a federal officer, and the grand jury refused 3 times to indict a woman accused of assaulting an FBI agent. The people are pushing back. Find the manner in which you can resist, and resist in that manner. There was a time, or the adage, as you all know, is you can indict a ham sandwich. Well, here is a guy who throws a sandwich at a cop and can't get indicted. The irony of that. On today's episode, the issue before us is the Israeli military on Monday massacred 20 Palestinians, including 5 journalists, in an attack on Gaza's Nasser hospital in the southern city of Khan Yunis that involved a double tap strike on rescue workers. According to the Associated Press, the initial strike at 10:10 a.m. Gaza time hit the 4th floor of the hospital, which has surgical operating rooms and doctors' residences, killing at least 2 people. Once rescue workers and journalists arrived on the scene, a second strike hit, killing 18 more, a double tap strike that was caught on video. My guest is considered by many to be one of the clearest voices calling for justice in Palestine, support of the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, the BDS movement, and the creation of a single democracy with equal rights in all of historic Palestine. In 2017, he released his second book, Injustice, the Story of the Holy Land Foundation 5, and his first book is about his personal life transformation entitled The General's Son, Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. Miko Peled, as always, my brother. Welcome back.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Let me start with the we'll work on that echo. Let me start with this whole concept of a double tap, because this to me sounds like a very clear strategy. They strike, they wait for respondents to come to the scene, then they strike again, enabling them to kill even more people. Not to mention they struck a hospital. Miko.
Well, thanks for having me again. This is, when you look at it in the larger context of a genocide, these actions make perfect sense. They want to kill as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And of course, it's not the first time they've bombed a hospital. This is almost like a policy. I mean, they've destroyed hospitals in the Gaza Strip. They've destroyed hospitals in other parts of Palestine. When you're conducting a genocide, you don't want people to survive. So why would you allow hospitals and emergency care workers and so on to exist? Why would you allow food in? Why would you allow medicine in? Why would you allow water in when you want to complete the genocide? So as horrifying as this is, and there are really no words to describe how horrible this is, the larger picture is that there's a genocide going on, and this is what happens when a genocidal regime follows the genocide that it said he was going to commit, and the world stands and just watches.
Newspaper Haaretz reported that the Israeli military said that the initial strike targeted a camera which they claimed was a Hamas camera that was being used to observe IDF forces. They say that an Israeli tank shell struck the area, then another one was fired to make sure the camera was destroyed. Even if the camera is an IDF camera, this definitely goes along with the adage, you're using a hammer to kill a gnat. You're going to use a tank shell to take down a camera? Why didn't they just call a sniper and have the sniper shoot the camera if that in fact was the rationale for this murder?
There's only one rationale for the murder. There's only one rationale, and that is the genocide. They said they're going to commit a genocide, and they're committing a genocide. That's the only rationale. What they say after each incident is completely immaterial. What they say, what they've been saying for the last 8 decades is immaterial. We know the facts on the ground are that there's a genocide going on. We know that it's a vicious, violent apartheid regime. And we know the Palestinians are defenseless, and nobody worries about the safety and security of Palestinians. And so this is the reality that goes on. Again, they're going to say all kinds of things. I mean, I don't think paying attention to what they say after each incident is relevant. Everything is Hamas, and everything is this, and everything is that, and everybody's a terrorist if they're Palestinians. I mean, you can shoot a Palestinian in the street in any city and claim that they're a terrorist, and that's it. And there's no accountability. So I think we need to move away from responding to what they say after each incident and take a broader look at what they've been saying for the last 8 decades. And they want to annihilate, they want to exterminate the Palestinian people and take over all of Palestine. That's what this is about.
There were, I have the name of 4 journalists, Miriam Abu Daga, who was a freelancer for the Associated Press, Mohammed Salama, who worked for Middle East Eye and Al Jazeera, Moaz Abu Taha, a freelance journalist who worked with several news outlets, and Ahmed Abu Aziz, who was also a freelance journalist. And journalists are supposed to be off limits. Journalists and relief workers, medical people, are supposed to be off limits. I haven't really heard much of an outcry from the United States relative to this atrocity, especially since Western journalists are now and have been targeted here.
Well, again, I don't think it comes as a news to anyone, but the United States is bankrolling this genocide. The United States is supplying the weapons for this genocide. So why would the United States care when the genocide is taking place, or pretend to be surprised? You know, this fits into this larger scheme of annihilating, destroying a person. If someone is Palestinian, if someone is serving the Palestinian cause, if someone is committed to exposing the crimes of the state of Israel, then they are a perfectly legitimate target as far as Israel is concerned. And I think here lawmakers and politicians in this country seem to agree with that. That's the crux of the problem, that there's broad agreement that it's the life of Palestinians does not matter, that it has no value, that it's okay to kill Palestinians because they're Palestinians.
I've been saying for a while, when we hear reports and we hear these stories, that in many instances, it's not as much of what is being said as what is not being said. For example, one of the most recent stories is, Netanyahu says they're going back into Gaza. Well, that to me says 2 things. One, that the initial strike, for as horrific as it has been and as genocidal as it has been, demonstrates to a certain degree how weak the IDF is, because we've been told for years, oh my God, they're just one of the greatest forces on the planet, and all they do is walk around and kick ass and take names. But really what they've been doing is murdering innocent women and children and other innocent people. And the other thing that's not really said here is to what you just articulated. Netanyahu can't go back in without the United States support, can't go in without United States logistics, United States money, United States weapons, United States coordinates. So, Netanyahu wants to stand there and beat his chest, we're going back in, but you can't go in without the United States.
Well, you're right. And the fact is, they are going in. They're mobilizing 100,000 troops now. Tens of thousands have already been mobilized on top of what's already been there. They're mobilizing 100,000 troops that they're going to use to go in and take, as they say, the city of Gaza. And you're right. Without the United States, they wouldn't be able to do this. And so the United States is complicit in genocide. And that's something I tell people in this country all the time. Unless you stand up and shout at the top of your voice that you oppose this and do everything you can to prevent this from continuing and to demand a change of policy here in this country, then you are complicit as an American, because it's our taxpayers' money. And it's also the representatives that we vote for and the politicians that we put in office that are allowing this to go on and bankrolling it and sending the arms and so forth. So this is very, very serious. I don't think people have the proper appreciation to just how serious this is, not only first and foremost for Palestinians, but also for people who are complicit. One day, hopefully sooner rather than later, there will be judgment. People will be taken to court, will be held accountable. And anybody who allowed this to happen, anybody who did not stand in the way of this happening, should be considered or should see themselves as complicit with this Holocaust of the Palestinian people.
I wrote a piece last week to your point about American elected representatives and who pays them. I wrote a piece last week called "He Who Pays the Piper Calls the Tune." And if I may be so presumptuous as to quote myself here, according to an April 2024 article, in the Guardian titled "Pro-Israel U.S. Groups Plan $100 Million Effort to Unseat Progressives Over Gaza," AIPAC is betting $100 million will be enough to fight back a wave of progressive dissent over Israel's war in Gaza. The 2024 election will be the bellwether of the enduring impact. And then I say many voters are confused. They can't understand why in so many instances the individuals they elect to represent their interests get to Congress and then represent interests of outside forces. And this is looking specifically at the Congressional Black Caucus. For example, Richie Torres received $1,165,583 from the security industry, $536,000 from AIPAC. Hakeem Jeffries, $886,000 from AIPAC. Gregory Meeks, $510,000 from AIPAC. And they also gave Kamala Harris $6 million. So that's just a couple of examples of what it is you're talking about. He who pays the piper calls the tune. And to me, this is one reason why we're not hearing more outrage from Congress, is because they've been bought to be silent.
Absolutely. This is well known. I mean, it's not even hidden. I mean, Israel doesn't even hide this, that they're spending all these millions to do this. In other words, it's in the open. Everybody who wants to know knows that this is what's been going on. It's not a secret. It's not something that is being hidden. The numbers are there. Anybody who wants to see them. Members of elected politicians in this country are bought by the Zionist lobby, or the different lobbies, the different groups that are out there, both in local elections and national elections. That's the reality that exists in this country. I mean, and again, now we're facing a genocide, and I know I've said this several times, I'm repeating myself, there is a genocide, there's a Holocaust taking place. What is happening in Gaza is, there are no words to describe the cruelty, the brutality, starving people in a concentration camp, or rather a death camp, when 5-minute drive outside of the camp, all the resources, they're abundant resources, water, food, medicine, anything you want. But keeping 2 million people in these conditions is horrible. And then the rest of Palestine, it's not quite as bad, but the destruction, the killing, the torture of political prisoners is going rampant. I mean, it's the reality in Palestine is the horror is beyond words. And yet, like you said, the American politicians are bought and are willing to allow this to happen. And I wonder what they envision their legacy is going to be. What are they going to tell their children and grandchildren one day when they ask them, where did you stand? What did you do to prevent this?
A question that I get asked a lot, particularly on my Sirius XM show, is where's the pushback from other countries in the region? Outside of Yemen and outside of Hezbollah, where in Lebanon and Iran, a lot of folks are asking, where are the other countries in their outrage and in their response?
Well, people respond. Obviously, people in the streets of the Arab world are responding, and the Muslim world are responding. The governments do what they do. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's fair to ask that question about the countries neighboring to Palestine, as opposed to ask the question about the rich Western countries and the United States. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who should be answerable. If you're a leader, and I think I may have said that you and I talked about this before, if you're a leader of an Arab country today, what are your options? You see what happened to Libya, you see what happened to Iraq, you see what is happening to Yemen, you see what has happened to all these other countries that stood, Syria, that stood with the Palestinians. They've been destroyed. They're in rubble. They're completely in ruins. Now you see the countries that are normalizing with Israel and have good relations with America, and they're doing fine. You're an Arab leader. What would you choose? Which way would you go? Mm-hmm. So you have the wonderful Yemenis who are standing with Palestine 110% and are showing it. You had the Lebanese Hezbollah who are standing with Palestine and were showing it and are paying a heavy price and paid and continue to pay a heavy price. But not everybody is that dedicated to this sort of thing, and that's the reality. The question is, why is the United States, why is Canada, why is the United Kingdom and the rich countries in Europe, why are they continuing to support this genocide? The demand needs to be of them to stop, because that's where the money and that's where the weapons are coming from. They're not coming from Jordan and Egypt. They're coming from the United States, they're coming from Germany, they're coming from the United Kingdom. These are the questions that need to be asked. These are the governments that need to be held accountable for what is happening, because if they stopped, the genocide could stop. If they imposed sanctions, the genocide would stop. So they're the ones who we need to be demanding answers from, and not any other countries. And some of the other countries are doing what they can, but they're between a rock and a hard place, whereas the rich Western countries are the ones who are complicit in allowing this to happen.
We're looking at, for 2025, we're coming upon the 80th session of the UN General Assembly. What, if anything, mentioning the particularly the Western countries that you're talking about, Britain has talked about, and France has talked about recognizing the state of Palestine. I think France may have thrown their hat in that. Britain may have thrown its hat in that ring as well. I think Spain, a couple of other European countries have said, unless Israel takes serious steps, they're going to, at the UN General Assembly, recognize the state of Palestine. That to me seems to be more symbolism than substantive. We're coming up on the 80th session of the UN General Assembly in September. Your thoughts?
Well, you're right. It's symbolism and it's meaningless. Recognizing the state that doesn't exist is completely it's meaningless. There is no state of Palestine. There's a Palestinian Authority, which is not a state at all, has no authority whatsoever, and represents no one. So what these governments are trying to do is somehow appease their base, somehow appease their constituents by saying, "Look, we're doing something for Palestine." Whereas in fact they don't do anything, and so it's a win-win for them. They pretend they're doing something to appease their constituents, and at the same time they're not doing anything. So everybody wins. What they should do is recognize that the state of Israel is an apartheid state, like so many human rights organizations have already demonstrated, that there's a genocide going on, that sanctions need to be put in place to bring down the apartheid state and to allow for a free democratic Palestine to take its place on all of historic Palestine. That would be a meaningful move towards ending the genocide, towards ending this horrendous suffering of the Palestinian people, the elimination and destruction of the Palestinian people. But they don't want to do that. They just want to say something, and they say, well, if Israel doesn't do so and so and such and so until September, Israel's not going to do any of these things. But even if, and again, even if they do end up recognizing, which I very strongly doubt, it's a completely meaningless statement. It's not even cosmetic. It's nothing, and it helps no one. Certainly not the Palestinians. What needs to be put in place are guarantees to the safety and security of the Palestinian people, protection for the Palestinian people. Palestinian people are being massacred by the tens of thousands, by the hundreds of thousands in the Gaza concentration camp, in the Gaza death camp. They're being killed throughout the rest of Palestine as well. Homes are being demolished. The number of political prisoners and Palestinians being kidnapped and tortured in Israeli prisons is beyond belief. The conditions in the Israeli prisons are beyond belief. The conditions of the prisoners when they come out, they look like shells. They look like people who came out of a grave. It's so horrible. They're denied food. They're denied air. They're denied sunlight. They're denied exercise. They're beaten every single day. They're tortured every single day. I mean, it's unbelievable what is happening in those prisons. So all of this is taking place, and the best these European states or these Western countries can do is recognize a Palestinian state. What are they recognizing exactly? So it's hypocrisy, because on the one hand they're supporting the genocide, and on the other hand they're trying to pretend that they care, and they don't.
One of the things that indicated to me that so much of this was really, as you just indicated, even less than symbolic. I think it was France, Macron, who said, "And we're working this through Mahmoud Abbas," and that, to me, as you just indicated, he represents no one, he has no power. But I think it's even more important for people to understand the Palestinians don't respect the man. It's not that he's a strong voice on the international stage and the West is ignoring him. It's he's seen as a puppet for the West, and the Palestinians don't trust him. So for France to say, we're running this and working this through Abbas, you might as well just be talking to Donald Trump.
Well, again, it falls into the same thing of the the West, being complicit with Israel and allowing for this false narrative of a Palestinian state, a Palestinian president, that don't exist. There's no state, there is no president. And that's that. But they like to. This was the beauty, in a way, of what is known as the Oslo Accord that created this Palestinian Authority, so-called authority, which has no authority. These are basically collaborators that are working for the oppressor, for the state of Israel, and have no authority whatsoever. I mean, just yesterday, Israeli forces entered Ramallah and started killing and arresting people. And so the Palestinian authorities is nothing, and working with them means nothing. You may as well be working with the state of Israel, which is really what that is. So yes, I mean, this is everybody's falling in line with the Israeli narrative, which negates the rights of Palestinians to live, to exist, to breathe, to eat, to have any rights that human beings should have. That's the problem. And again, it's perfect for the West because they can pretend they're doing something while doing something completely different.
They aren't even, Palestinians aren't even allowed to fish in the Mediterranean. I mean, it's anyway. One of the things that I notice doesn't really get much discussion is the generational impact of the genocide. They're starving people, they're starving children, and the starvation in many regards has reached a point of no return. A child's body in its formative years requires nutrients and nutrition. And when you deny the body those building blocks of nutrition, the development is stunted and cannot be reversed. So a lot of people think, oh, if we can just open the gates and give them food now, we can solve the problem, ignoring the generational implications of this, that you're going to have a whole generation of malnourished adults because they were malnourished children.
Yes, I think the repercussions of this horror are going to be very long lasting. You're absolutely right. I mean, we look at survivors of the Nazi Holocaust, and what that was like for them. This is not something you can cure. It's not something that you can remedy. This is something that is then carried on by next generation and the next generation, and we know that. We know that for a fact. So yes, and again, it's a genocide. That's what you do when you want to destroy people. You destroy people, and it's easy. It's cheaper to deny them food, have them die of starvation, than to shoot them. And that's exactly what is happening. I mean, again, I know I've said it several times. People do not seem to understand the gravity of the situation or don't want to accept it. This is Nazi Germany once again. Only now it's being conducted. This Holocaust is taking place in Palestine, and I don't know what it's going to take for people in the West to wake up, for Western governments to wake up and put an end to it. But actually, I do know what it's going to take. It's going to take constituents standing up. It's going to take consumers of the media to stand up, and in the big way. But this is what's going on. I mean, the children would be starving in Palestine, a country that has always been rich with resources, is unheard of. Dying of thirst, dehydration, lack of basic most medical care. It's unheard of. It's absolutely unheard of, and only because they are because they're Palestinians and because they are in this concentration camp and other ghettos throughout Palestine, outside of the Gaza concentration camp. This is so severe, and again, you're very methodically showing all the symptoms of this genocide, and people need to realize that every single one of these things that you've been describing is a part of a plan to exterminate the Palestinian people. And again, people in this country need to understand that they're paying for it, and very much, unless they're standing up against it, complicit with it. And when it ends, which it will eventually, and when Palestine is free, which I believe it will be, there will be trials. People will be held accountable. And I know there are organizations like the Hind Rajab Foundation, which is targeting soldiers and officers and politicians who are complicit in this genocide, and it's going to grow even more. And these people and the people who supported them and the people who didn't stand up are going to be shamed, if not prosecuted.
Robert Brown, thank you very much for that $5 super sticker. Greatly appreciate it. You just mentioned the comparison. Oh no! Before I get to that, let me, as I am doing this methodically, as we now hear about the genocide through starvation. What now gets pushed to the back burner, if discussed at all, are the snipers and the generation of children missing limbs. So before we got to the starvation, say 2 years ago, a year ago, the focus was they're intentionally, the IDF is intentionally shooting and maiming children, shooting them in the elbow, shooting them in the knee, shooting them in the hip, creating this entire generation of children without limbs. But that has been pushed to the back burner because now we're watching people starve to death.
That's very true. I mean, that's been pushed to the back burner. The fact that Palestinians in other parts of Palestine are being killed and their land is being taken and are being subjected to riots by gangs of settlers. All of this has been put to the back burner. The fact that the Ibrahimi Mosque, which is one of the 4 or 5 holiest places for Islam and probably the second holiest place in Palestine, has just been taken over by settlers. This is a magnificent mosque in the city of Hebron that goes back to very early times, and it was just handed over to the settlers. These are things that, and in Jerusalem itself, land is being taken. Palestinians are being, they go through a process of what they call de-Arabization of the city of Jerusalem. Homes are being taken. Palestinians are being thrown out, being killed, being arrested. Massive building for Jews only throughout all of Palestine. Numbers of home demolitions that skyrocket, and on and on and on. And each one of these, and I already mentioned this, the prisoners, each and every one of these issues, like you say, now seems less important because everybody's saying, well, all eyes are on Gaza. What the people in Gaza are suffering is worse. And it is worse. It is worse. It's the worst we've ever seen it. At the same time, we have to look at it holistically and say we have to end it all. We're not going to be able to stop the genocide in Gaza on its own. We're not going to be able to release political prisoners as an issue on its own. We're not going to be able to end any of these horrific policies without completely dismantling the regime that is in charge. When Israel attacked Iran, people refer to Iran as a regime and to Israel as a country, and I've been saying, no, you don't understand. Israel is the name of the regime. Iran is a country. Mm-hmm. They may not like the government. Israel is a regime. It's a name of a regime that has taken over a country called Palestine. The country is called Palestine. The country is Palestine. It's been taken over by a regime, a Zionist regime, which decided to call the country Israel. And that's why we're seeing everything we're seeing. So no one issue can be resolved on its own, although we need to highlight them so people understand how horrific this is. But no one issue is going to be resolved on its own. It has to be done holistically. The entire system has to be taken down, just like we saw, here in this country with slavery and then with Jim Crow. It had to go. Not that there aren't plenty of problems still to work with. In South Africa, apartheid had to go. It wasn't about giving people this, that, or the other. It was about ending the system of oppression, ending it, bringing it down completely. That is what needs to happen in Palestine.
And so elaborate on what that looks like as in terms of a democratic Palestine. You talk about massive houses for Jews only. The United States right now is in Ukraine talking about we have to support democracy in Ukraine, even though Joe Biden's administration went in 2014 and overthrew the democratically elected president in Ukraine. The United States, Joe Biden put a $25 million bounty on the head of President Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. Donald Trump raised that to $50 million. Nicolas Maduro is the democratically elected president in Venezuela. So the United States loves to talk about democracy. But what would democracy look like in a free, democratic Palestine?
Well, the problem is that you don't want to ruin a good story with the facts, right? And
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, Miko. My bad. You know what? Let's move on.
that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. You're ruining a perfectly good story with facts, and it's really quite demoralizing, I have to say. A democratic Palestine. Well, imagine there's no apartheid regime. The apartheid regime falls. Free and fair, one person, one vote elections take place. They vote for a legislature that represents all the people. There's some 12 million people living in Palestine. About 7.5 million, 8 million are Palestinians, and the rest are Israeli Jews. And so you have elections, you have a legislature, you have an executive branch, you put together a constitution, you start operating. Now, Palestine, as a history, this particular chapter of the history of Palestine, the last 80 years, are a very dark and sad chapter. It's not the first one. The country has, through thousands of years of the existence of the country of Palestine, they've gone through some difficult times. There were the Crusades, who were very bloody, and others. But the important thing is that we bring this chapter to an end, and we look forward. People like to talk about stability, democracy, peace, and all these things. Well, right beyond the apartheid state, they exist. We need to stop investing in the apartheid state. We're investing in the obstacle to these things. So politicians say we believe in democracy and stability. We want stability in the region and peace. Well, why are you investing in the obstacle, the one destabilizing factor in the region, in Western Asia and North Africa, is the state of Israel, who has been attacking and starting wars, who has created a massive refugee problem, who's been engaged in terrorism, who's been conducting assassinations throughout the region. The state of Israel has. They've destabilized the region completely. They make sure that this region remains unstable. They do that as a policy. So if we want to see stability and peace and democracy, it's right there. Just look over the wall of apartheid, and it's right there. We just need to remove the wall of apartheid. So it looks like a very healthy, normal, democratic state. And then you move on from there. And there are many problems that have to be resolved after that. You have to put in the methods to allow for the refugees to return, and practical steps that will allow refugees to return, and on and on and on, and of course rebuild, and there's a lot of things that will have to happen, releasing and rehabilitating thousands upon thousands of political prisoners, rehabilitating the people in Gaza. But none of that is going to happen until apartheid is dismantled and a real democratic Palestine, or all of historic Palestine, takes its place. That is what we should all be focusing on. And again, see this chapter as one dark chapter in the history of Palestine, and it is on us to make sure that this chapter is as short as possible, and we need to end it as quickly as possible, or else thousands and thousands of Palestinians will continue to die.
And I'd like for you to elaborate when I talk about democracy in Palestine. A lot of people still don't realize when they talk about Israel as a Jewish state, they don't understand that there are Palestinians that can't vote. They don't understand that there are roads that Palestinians cannot drive. There are Jewish only roads. There are Jewish only enclaves on land stolen from the Palestinians. Settlers can walk around and murder Palestinians indiscriminately. People don't understand those details. So when you talk about democracy in Palestine, talk about it in that context.
Well, right now there is no, this claim that the state of Israel is a democracy is not true. It's a myth. It's a very strong myth. It's got very strong roots, but it's still a myth. It's not true. The state of Israel, the Israeli regime governs all of Palestine, all 12.5 million people. but they govern them with different laws, different policies, based on whether they're Jewish or Palestinian. And the Palestinians are governed based on where they live specifically, because there are different laws that discriminate against Palestinians in different parts of the country. It's a very, very sophisticated web of racist laws, discriminatory legal system. And so that is the reality. An Israeli Jew can live anywhere throughout the country, and the law protects them. A Palestinian, regardless of where they live, there is no law that protects them. There are no laws that protect Palestinians, only laws that discriminate against Palestinians, and then they're just practices, regular practices and policies that discriminate against Palestinians. So if a Palestinian wants to buy an apartment in a neighborhood that is a Jewish neighborhood, then nobody will sell. They'll not be able to buy one. If a Palestinian wants to build a house, they will not be allowed, they will not be given a permit. If they build anyway because they have to, then their home will be demolished. If an Israeli Jew builds a house without a permit, they'll get a fine. And then maybe they'll go to court a few years later. And then maybe the inspector will be, it goes on and on and on. You're not going to see the military or the police come in with bulldozers and destroy a Jewish Israeli home. You're never going to see that. And so it is such a deeply sophisticated, racist, discriminatory legal system that you'd almost, there's no way to explain all of it, in one session. It is so complicated, and it changes all the time to keep everybody on their toes, and also to catch Palestinians breaking the law because they just changed the regulation, or they changed the law, or suddenly there's another permit that they need and they don't have, or it expired. They keep Palestinians on the run, and as they do this, Palestinians have to pay. Palestinians pay taxes, but they get no services. Palestinians pay for their permits, and many times they're denied, or even if they have the permit, they're still not allowed to do or go where they need to go. Palestinians do not have freedom of movement. There is no freedom of movement for Palestinians. Of course, the worst example is the Gaza concentration camp, but this is true throughout all of Palestine. And on and on and on. Never mind, access to things, luxuries like electricity or running water, which are, completely taken for granted in every Israeli Jewish settlement, every Jewish Israeli city. Palestinians get water and electricity in little bits, considerably less than Israeli Jews settlers do. So I mean, there is no democracy in any way, shape, or form in Palestine right now. The Israeli regime is an apartheid, oppressive regime. It's a genocidal regime as well. So when we talk about democracy, we're talking about equal rights. We're talking about one person, one vote. We're talking about a state that takes care of its people, that guarantees the safety and security of the Palestinian people. So any Israeli can't just go and shoot and kill a Palestinian, and not to mention the state, the regime itself, killing Palestinians by wholesale as they do. That's what we're talking about. We need to completely reverse the reality right now. And every day that we wait is going to make it harder and harder, and it's going to make the rehabilitation more difficult. And like you said, how do you rehabilitate a nation that is so malnourished? Because this is not going to end today. The starvation is going to go on and on and on until this thing is over. Who knows how many children are going to end up, malnourished like this, and what kind of developmental problems we know they're going to have these horrific developmental problems, psychologically and mentally and physically and so on. All of this is going to have to be taken care of. And so the longer we wait, obviously, the more people suffer, and the longer the rehabilitation is going to be. So this is not a small thing. This is not a thing that we can delay. The urgency of ending the regime, of bringing down the Israeli regime and allowing for the rights of Palestinians to materialize is of the highest urgency. There is nothing more urgent right now, I believe, in the world than to bring down the regime, end the genocide of the Palestinian people, provide safety and security for the Palestinian people, and allow for a real democracy with equal rights to emerge on all of historic Palestine, called Palestine.
I see Wicks, Obama, not Biden, overthrew Ukraine in 2014. I see Wicks. Thank you. You're right. In the midst of the conversation, but potato. But no, you're right. I got you, and thank you for that clarity. You were talking about the havoc that Israel wreaks in the region, and that took me to Alexander Haig's infamous statement that Israel is the largest American aircraft carrier in the world that can't be sunk. And that's another element of this that I was talking about earlier, in that when you read these stories, you read the story, but there's so much that's not said, that Israel is there to a great degree operating on behalf of the United States.
Well, I don't know. I think their interests converge. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure Israel is doing the work for the United States or the other way around. I mean, both of these, we could argue. They could be argued either way. The point is, there's a genocide going on, executed by Israel, with American complicity, with American weapons, with American money. And I think it's more because the Zionist, the pro-Israel lobbies have been so effective in this country that they have strong influence on really every facet of American society: education, culture, politics, of course, journalism, and on and on and on. I think it's more of that, but.
Okay.
Regardless, and that's why it's so hard to move this, because the Zionism is so entrenched in this country that you can't move. You can move it from one place, but then you've got 50 states and they're entrenched in every city and every town. At the same time, we need to get off our backsides, and we need to do everything we can to end the genocide. We need to end it, and we need to end it now. And I don't believe that there's such a thing as an aircraft carrier that can't be sunk. Any aircraft carrier can be sunk, and if not sunk, swept away. But this regime has got to go, and the safety and security of Palestinian people and the life of Palestinian people has to be guaranteed, has to be secured.
And we know you're right about the aircraft carriers. That's why the United States pulled the carriers out of the Red Sea, because they didn't want Ansar Allah to sink those aircraft carriers, or Russia from the Kinzhal missiles. Anyway, final question, and it's kind of a two-part question. One is maybe a statement and a question. One of the things that gets me a lot of negative feedback, which is fine, is when I ask the question, you've referred to Gaza as a concentration camp. And so for me, that always begs the question, how can a group of people that endured the Holocaust as they did, and we are quite familiar with the mantra, never again. I guess that meant never again to them, that they could turn around and impose an even more horrific reality on another group of people in their land. And with that, I'll ask you to close by, as you just really have, but as a wrap up, what is it that is most important to you for people to clearly understand about this reality?
Well, first of all, I would say that the people who suffered and survived the Holocaust are not the people who are committing the crimes against the Palestinians necessarily. The vast majority of survivors of the Holocaust did not go to Palestine, did not go to what became Israel. They went either back home to their countries or went to other countries. The vast majority, and many of those who did go were forced to go and then left. So I think it's important to differentiate between the people who suffered persecution by the Nazis and the Israelis, because it's not the same thing. Most Israelis had nothing to do with the Holocaust. So that's one thing.
In fact, wait a minute, to that point, as I understand it, a lot of the Zionists actually looked down and frowned upon those Jews that suffered in concentration camps, because they saw them as weak and they saw them as losers.
They said, well, had they been Zionists, this wouldn't have happened to them, so it serves them right. I remember hearing that argument as a child growing up.
Okay.
So So in Jerusalem. But the point is that, so people need to be educated. People need to move away from these, mantras and bumper stickers, the Jewish state, Israel has a right to exist, Jews have a right to a state, all of that. None of that is relevant. The only thing that's relevant is that there's a genocide going on. It's being perpetrated by the state of Israel, by this regime. This regime has taken over Palestine. It's been destroying it and murdering its people for almost 8 decades. That has to stop. That is the first point that has to happen. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, Palestinians need to see their rights materialize. They have a right to self-determination. They have a right to their country. They have a right to return to their homes and their land. They have a right to live. And we need to protect that, and we need to ensure that that is what happens. So people need to educate themselves. In fact, here at Palestine House of Freedom, we're working on a curriculum right now. We're going to start offering these courses for people where they can take them online or in person. We're here on Capitol Hill to do just that, and then expand the circle. So once you're comfortable arguing this, then you can go and talk to other people and really grow the circle, that people can feel more comfortable talking to their Jewish neighbor or their Jewish son-in-law, because people are always afraid to bring it up. That's what needs to happen. And when we grow that way, our influence will grow and we'll be able to end it.
Miko Peled, in terms of Palestine House, the Palestine House of Freedom, how can people reach out to you? Where do they learn more about the Palestine House for Freedom?
Well, PalestineHouseOfFreedom.org is our website. We're on all social media. We're on Instagram. We have events here every week almost, a lot of weekends, educational events, community events, you name it, panels and so on. So please check us out. We have an exciting event coming up in New York next month. So come check us out and come visit. We're here open every day, 10 to 5. On Capitol Hill. You can't miss the Palestinian flag right here on Pennsylvania Avenue.
And it's a beautiful space.
Thank you.
It is a beautiful space. My brother Miko Peled, thank you so much for your time. PalestineHouseOfFreedom.org.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, as always.
Thanks, Miko. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye.
All right, folks. Got to thank Peled, of course, for his time, for joining me today. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. It'll probably be me with I've got some issues. There's an interesting piece entitled there's an interesting discussion talking about a post-constitutional America. And that is really the basis of what the Trump administration is operating on. So we'll probably go into that tomorrow. Follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. Follow us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. I thought that discussion with Miko was incredibly clear. I know there were some ridiculous comments, and but that's fine, because we don't discriminate against those that want to provide different perspectives. But the perspective that was provided there was just straight Zionist crap. But with that being said, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because we're rhetoric free. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful, blessed remainder of your day. Peace. Until tomorrow, I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.